recording. Bang. We're live. Are we live? We're live. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, I should put a fucking shirt on me. Bang. What if I told you that the Canadian economy, praised for stability amongst the West, is actively being held together by a financial lie? While headlines tout strong immigration and record real estate development, we'll retake that. While headlines tout strong immigration and promising real estate, behind the curtain, we're watching one of the most sustained financial repression regimes propped by the West. While headlines tout record immigration and strong real estate, behind the curtain shows a financial repression regime that has been running for the longest time out of any other country in the West. In this video, we break down the architecture propping up the Canadian economy. We're talking debt, distortion, and the mechanisms designed to keep you trapped. All of this without people noticing. But by the end of this video, you'll understand how this long game of financial repression works and why it affects every Canadian, including you and including me. In this video, we break down the hidden architecture. In this video, I break down the hidden architecture propping up the Canadian economy. We'll discuss everything from debt, distortion, to the mechanics that are designed to keep you and me trapped. Trapped, all without anybody recognizing what's going on. By the end, you'll understand how this long game of financial repression plays out and how it affects every Canadian like you and like me. Let's get into it. Before we start, let's have a conceptual alignment so we understand what we're discussing and we can all agree on standard definitions. Forgive me. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm a Bitcoiner. there's mistakes, so be it. So first, let's define this. Financial repression. It is a set of government policies designed to keep... Okay. Let's define it. Financial repression. It is a set of government policies designed to keep interest rates below inflation rates. You can think of this like a slow wealth drain. Savers who save in dollars will get punished. They will get punished and they will lose purchasing power. However, borrowers, people who lend money, will be the ones to benefit from this regime. Now, some of the tools that are used in financial repression are as follows. First, we have capped bond yields, where governments and central banks will directly intervene to do exactly that. Cap bond yields from rising and keep them suppressed. Next off is negative real rates. When interest rates minus inflation equal a negative number, that means the interest you are accruing on your bonds or on your equities, that results in a negative number, you are losing purchasing power in real time. Another one is pension mandates to hold government debt is basically a form of capital control. The government comes along and tells pensions, you must own our debt. If not, there will be consequences. They don't say that part out loud though. And finally, another mechanic or function of financial repression is what we know as stealth quantitative easing, or stealth QE for short. And basically that is the central bank intervening through backdoor liquidity measures such as reverse repo facilities or using treasury accounts to siphon or to inject liquidity without outright stating it's quantitative easing. This isn't new. We've seen this before in times of history. And the biggest example I can give you is post World War II, right? We went to war, we came away with a buttload of debt, and we had no way out other than growing economies, right? So what did the government do? They brought interest rates low. They artificially suppressed rates for a good 10 years. Well, they let inflation run hot. So think 2.5-3% interest rate and then minus 5% inflation, right? You're left with a negative 2.5% yield, which means anybody who's holding that debt or that currency is losing. Whoever's issuing the debt is winning. All right, so we've seen this in World War II, and we're seeing it again all across the West, all across Europe, perhaps, but more specifically, we're talking about in Canada today, right now. Don't believe me? Here we have some data I've pulled, I've researched, and I think tells a pretty powerful story, okay? Okay, so this first chart I'm about to show you is the Canadian 5-year mortgage versus household debt to GDP. Okay, so we can use a mortgage as a standard interest rate for this. It's going to be 5 years. So you can see at the very beginning, after the great financial crisis, post 2008, rates were high, very high. Borrowing was low. And now, as rates slowly came down, right, we saw household debt rise, right? Because as rates came down, servicing that debt became easier, conditions became looser, and anyone and everyone could go and get a loan and be relatively okay. All right, so we're going, it intersects and then it crosses. Okay, so debt now soars above interest, right? This is cheap money mania. And then we get to a point where COVID hits, rates bottom, debt peaks, okay? But then what happens after COVID? Not we specifically, the Central Bank of Canada, the Bank of Canada, went on a massive rate hike from like 0.5%, 1% rates, boom, 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 up to 5%, okay? But then what happened there? The debt did not budge. The debt stayed up here while rates came up. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. Okay, $100 loan at 5%, you're fine. $10,000 loan at 5%, getting tricky. $100,000, tricky. $1 million, even trickier. Let's try $1 billion, right? Because these countries run deficits, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars in deficits. You tack on a 5% interest rate on $1 billion deficit, yeah, good luck with that. That's a lot of interest, right? That is a lot of interest. Servicing costs become so expensive. How are you supposed to pay that back? Without financial repression. When rates come below inflation and real yields go negative. Next, what do we have here? This is something to behold. We'll get into a little more about this next video, but we'll get into this next video just to show how bad the interest payments have become on the national debt, especially in Canada and the US too. The US is a big shit. We have healthcare costs against national interest cost on the debt. What does that look like? We now spend more interest than we do on healthcare. That's bad. That is very bad. Why? Because now, if the government was responsible enough, they would choose. They would choose to either pay for healthcare or the interest, right? Instead, they subsidize both with new money. It's another conversation for later. But what I want you to take away from this chart is that interest payments on the national debt are screaming higher. And how do they solve that? Financial repression. Okay? So, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? I hate to break it to you, but if you hold dollars, if you hold fiat currency or debt instruments, I'm talking GICs if you're in Canada, I'm talking bonds, I'm talking treasuries, I'm talking anything that does not yield you more than like 5% inflation, we're losing. We're losing. And that part about the government making pensions hold their debt, that means your retirement fund is leaking, is bleeding you for 2.5% minimum in this regime annually. The pension funds are losing you 2.5% annually from this regime. Okay? We just had the Bank of Canada hold rates at 2.5%, sorry, 2.75%, while inflation runs well over 3%. Right there, negative real rates. If you are holding bonds, GICs, and not equities, not Bitcoin, you are losing. Okay? You are losing. Now, if you're in Canada, even in the States, even in the West, if you are still using fiat currency, I want you to ask yourself, are we financially stable? Really think on it. Please, really think on it. Now, if you enjoyed this video, if you want to read more in depth, feel free to check out my Substack. I'll link it down below over at Coining Capital, where I've posted a full report on the quiet collapse of Canada. I've actually posted multiple, but it goes more in depth over this topic. All right. If you're interested, there's more data, a little bit more charts. It ties together quite nicely. But anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. That would be greatly appreciated. I will catch you back in the next video where we further discuss the modeling and time scenarios behind this regime and when it could collapse. So if you don't want to get left in the dust, make sure you stick around. Keep a lookout for that next video. I'm Chris. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.